Hey Wire Monkeys, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Cabling. Today's show we're talking about single pair Ethernet. Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, estimators, technicians, project managers, ICT personnel, even the end user. We are connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified when new content is being produced? If you're listening to us on one of the audio podcast platforms like Stitcher or Google or one of the others, Apple, would you mind leaving us a 5-star rating? Those simple little steps helps us take on the algorithm so we can educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of people in the ICT industry. Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What are you doing? I do a live stream on TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and a bunch of other places. YouTube, where you get to ask your favorite RCDD, you and I both know that's me, your questions on installation, certification, design, estimation, project management, even career path questions. But I can hear you now. Chuck, I'm driving my truck home at 6 p.m. on Thursdays. I don't want to get into an accident. That's okay. They are recorded. And you can find those recordings on letstalkcabling.com so you can watch them at your convenience. And finally, while this show is free and will always remain free, if you would like to support this channel, make sure you click on this QR code right here, where you can buy me a cup of coffee. You can even schedule a 15-minute one-on-one call with me, after hours, of course. Or you can visit the webpage and visit one of our Amazon links, where you won't pay extra for it, but we'll get a small little stipend. Also, we're always looking out for corporate sponsors, so if your company's values align with educate, encourage, and enrich, make sure you reach out to me on one of the social media platforms and let's have a discussion. Single pair Ethernet. It's coming. They're doing it now, but it's going to come into its fruition probably in the next 12 to 18 months. So you need to start learning these things now. What is single pair Ethernet? How do you install single pair Ethernet? How do you test single pair Ethernet? Well, it's a good thing that Chuck knows a couple subject matter experts. And of course, you know that's going to be the folks from AEM. So welcome back to the show, Lisa Schwartz and Steve Cowles. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Great.
Glad to have you guys back on. Lisa, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So Lisa Schwartz, I am the Director of Product Marketing at AEM Precision Cable Test.
And so how long have you been in the industry? I mean, I know you're an expert, but somebody
really?
watching the show
You're
may
going
not
to
know.
ask me that
Wow,
question?
dude.
Wow, Chuck. So about 31 years.
See, and I'm not asking you that for me because I look at your LinkedIn profile. I know how long you've been in the industry, but my audience keeps growing and growing and growing. So I might have a few new people who might not know that you have 30 years of experience. And well, if they're watching the show, they would have recognized you from an episode a couple weeks back.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true.
Yep.
Yes.
Steve, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, my friend?
Steve Cowles. I am a product manager and I'm manager of the customer care and technical support part of AEM Test and Measurement, which we refer to as Precision Cable Test. And I've been in the industry for 37 years and been involved with Bixby about the same amount of time as Chuck has.
So the reason I asked you guys on is because, as you know, I am in all of the social media platforms. When I say that, I mean I'm in the groups, right? So there's Low Voltage Nation, Technology Worldwide, Telecom Technicians, and a few others that I'm in. I'm always watching what people are asking about, trying to stay plugged in because from my current day job, it's kind of hard to do that because I'm so hyper focused on what I do during the day that I don't really get a chance to see what technicians are really asking about. And I've seen a lot of confusion and a lot of questions about single pair Ethernet, right? So I figured, I know two people who can discuss this, wax poetic about this. So Lisa, can you tell us what is single pair Ethernet and how it might be different from traditional Ethernet?
Sure, sure. So, not a mystery behind single pair Ethernet. It's honestly very similar to four pair Ethernet. It's just using two pairs of cabling. Obviously, a very different type of connector. There's a few different types of connectors that are out there. But really, it is primarily used to support low bandwidth applications. You can even run power over Ethernet over it. And it's primarily being used right now in automotive applications and in automation and industrial environments, is primarily where we're seeing it.
So let me ask you this: in your opinion, if there's somebody out there who's got, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, low voltage experience doing voice and data cabling, is this something they can do?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, the termination is going to be a little bit different, but from a testing perspective, I think Steve's going to probably address some of that. We'll kind of show you that. But a lot of the measurements are exactly the same. If you are using our test equipment, the workflow as far as setting up the tester to run according to the standards, actually performing the test, saving the test, getting printed results, there's no difference.
Gotcha.
Doesn't matter which type of cable you're
Gotcha. So
testing.
you said there was a few different types of connectors they can use. Do you know what all those connectors are? I'm assuming you could probably use probably an APHC, right?
So an 8P8C is not going to be the connector of choice for single pair Ethernet. The exception being, you could run, as Lisa mentioned, single pair Ethernet is running on a single pair, where our regular Ethernet is four pair. You could run four single pair Ethernet signals on a four pair cable to an 8P8C. So this is the 8P8C that you're talking about, Chuck, for our normal four pair. This is what we're going to see for single pair Ethernet and structured cabling. That's an LC. It is a copper. It's referred to as the LC connector. So that's going to be the one that's predominant when it comes to our structured cabling scenarios in single pair Ethernet. You can see a big difference in the cable diameter here. Both of these are 23 gauge. This is Cat 6A here, and this one is a single pair 23 gauge. Now, there is a distance limitation when you use 23 gauge in single pair. So 23 gauge, you can go 400 meters. That's still 4 times what we can do on a four pair Ethernet. If you go down to 18 gauge, you can go 1,000 meters on it. Now, one differentiator there is on our four pair Ethernet, we're running minimum of a gig in most applications, and some people are running 10 gig on these things. So with single pair Ethernet, we're going to be boiling that down to 10 meg connection. So it's different from that standpoint. And as Lisa mentioned, it's because it's low bandwidth. We don't need that high rate of speed. We're offloading things like occupancy sensors and access controls, those kind of things.
Oh, I was just going to add to what Steve said. There's even some applications where, I'm going to call them low impact, simple security cameras.
You
They
must have
can
been
even
reading
run
my
over that.
mind because I was just getting ready to ask you, because hey, one of the common questions I get is how far can I run this camera on four pair cable, and we're used to the 100 meters, and when he said 400 meters, and I know the cameras, like you said, the simple security, not the 4K cameras with pan tilt
Right.
zoom, just a basic security camera. 100 meg, Steve, I think, right, is a good bandwidth for a camera kind of like that.
Yeah, and some of those you could run at a 10 megabit per second link, and you can also get power out there. That's the other thing. So you could get 7.7 watts of power at 1,000 meters on an 18 gauge. So Lisa mentioned the power. We can get power anywhere from 7.7 to 52 watts on single pair Ethernet, depending on the gauge of the wire and the distance that you're running. So there is that power option as well. So if you've got that camera and it needs power because you've got no remote power, you've got a solution. If it's a lower bandwidth camera, there you go.
Yeah. We had that actually up and running as a demonstration at our booth at Bixie. We had some cameras up there running off of single pair Ethernet.
Yes. That's just funny how you just read my mind, because I'm sitting there, I'm trying to formulate the question in my head, and you're like, you start going down that route. I was like, that's why I like having you guys on, because you guys, we think alike. We think alike.
Great mind.
Yes, great mind. Well, I don't know if it can qualify my mind as a great mind, but it's a mind. I'm minded all the time. Steve, Mr. Tester Man,
Yes, sir.
what are some testing equipment or tools that somebody might need if they're looking to get into single pair Ethernet testing?
Depending on whose tester you're using, you're going to have a couple choices. Now, right now, there aren't very many options out there. As far as I know, we're the only ones that are offering a test solution that is in production for this. And in our case, it's another Ethernet adapter, just like our channel adapters here. So it's the same, it's just a single pair Ethernet test adapter. And the benefit of that is now the technician has got this, as Lisa mentioned, the same workflow. The test setup's going to be the same. It's just using a different limit, and the tester automatically senses it's an SPE, and it'll switch to SPE. But other manufacturers may have adapters like that to go with them. Other manufacturers may have to reinvent the wheel and have a separate piece of test equipment. So it's best to consult with your manufacturer of whatever test equipment you're using. The challenge for test equipment manufacturers is the frequency range. And, without getting into the engineering weeds, we're testing at a much higher frequency range for our 4-pair cabling. With single pair Ethernet, you've got to go down to a lower frequency range, but you also have to change the steps at which you test. You've got to test at more frequent steps, every 20 kilohertz at the low frequency range. And your 4-pair testers are doing it like every 150 kilohertz. So there's many more data points in that test, and they're all at a much lower frequency. So if the tester can't do that, they're going to have to come up with a separate piece of test equipment. But I envision that as this technology develops, more and more test equipment manufacturers are going to step forward with a solution. Right now, single pair Ethernet is very much on the leading edge. It's not being installed in all of our smart buildings right now, but as that starts to grow, you're going to start to see more equipment manufacturers offering a test solution.
Gotcha. Now, I'm not going to ask you to talk about pricing for other test manufacturers, because I don't expect you to be knowledgeable about that. But let's say there's a company out there that has an AEM tester. Let's say it's one that's like I don't know, 5 miles that way, right, from my house.
Yeah.
And they want to buy a single pair Ethernet adapter so they can start testing it. What kind of investment are those adapters?
They're priced typically like a patch cord adapter. Off the top of my head, I shouldn't ballpark a price unless Lisa knows it right out. She probably has it at her fingertips.
I've got mine.
She probably has it handy and can tell us. But it's going to be priced, and our adapters will range depending on the technology in the adapter. But it is a standard test adapter, so it's not going to be like buying a whole new piece of equipment.
Right. Because I can tell you, somebody's listening to this show right now. As soon as you said that they have to get a single pair Ethernet adapter, the very first thing that pops in their head is, great, another adapter. How much am I going to pay for that?
I'm thinking they're less than $600 a pair.
Yeah, and I'm just saying ballpark.
They're $550 for the set.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
So that's okay. That's not bad, especially because it's tuned specifically for single pair Ethernet, and it's an investment. I mean, it sounds to me so far everything you said is something, and I concur with Lisa, that anybody can do this. If you can do 4-pair cabling, you can do this.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, and it's
simple.
And I haven't done a field termination on SPE yet, so I can't tell you the difference in how long it takes to do that compared to a 4-pair. And of course, my 4-pair termination is going to be a lot more time consuming than your 4-pair termination, Chuck, just because you're so much better at it.
Well, hey, whoa, slow down there. Slow your roll there. I'm an instructor now. I'm not out in the field terminating all the time. But as you said that, I was grabbing my pen to write down notes, grab a single pair Ethernet connectors for a future video. So that's how my brain works sometimes. But yeah, absolutely. So when we look at test results for category rated 4-pair cabling, people have problems analyzing that, which I don't understand why, because once you understand the basic principles, it's pretty easy. Don't let your lines go below the red line. Make sure there's a good clear spot. It's pretty self-evident. How can we interpret the test results for a single pair Ethernet test?
It's going to be, you talk about when you get the actual test reports, the PDF reports, and you're looking at them, trying to figure them out. Let me share my screen and I'll show you. It's actually not as complicated as you might think. So this is your typical 4-pair we're looking at. So you've got you're looking at your information. You've got your tester information up top, the limit that you used. All this information is here. You've got your test results, and I can kind of zoom in on this a little bit, make it a little easier to see. So
there you go.
We've got our length and prop delay. So you're looking at, your value here, what your limit is, and you've got your pass, fail, or informational, and then your RF parameters. Same thing. You've got your limits, your margins, and then your plots. And obviously, the red line is our limit line, so you don't want to see anything below that or above it, depending on how you've got it set up. An SPE test, it's going to look very similar. Let me blow this up to 100% so we can look at it. Same kind of information, but it's less information. Up here at the top, we're not testing as many things here when compared with what we've got for our 4-pair. And the same thing down here when we get into the RF parameters. Fewer RF parameters. We're only doing return loss, insertion loss, and if it's unshielded, we're going to be doing TCL, ELTCTL. If it is a shielded cable, it gets even simpler because the TCL and the ELTCTL go away. They're not needed. And again, you've got limit lines and you've got your plots, and you've got a simple wire map. In this case, you have the 1-pair and a shield. So you've actually got less to interpret. And with things like that, return loss and insertion loss, you're pretty much limiting what you have to troubleshoot when it comes to trying to figure out what's going on with that cable, because we're just, let me stop this share here so it doesn't look too goofy. So insertion loss and return loss are your big ones there, right? And of course, length. Length, you got 1,000 meters. So, that's length is length. It's the same as looking at a 4-pair test, just a different limit. And return loss and insertion loss, it's going to be the same troubleshooting techniques that we do when we're doing 4-pair. Return loss, we're looking for a compatibility issue between the connector and the cabling, or a poor termination. Insertion loss, excessive length, or potentially maybe the connector and combination of the cable, or possibly something happened to the cable during installation, those kind of things. So it's going to be the same process, but there's fewer points where it can fail. You're not looking at near-end crosstalk. You're not looking at ACRF. You're not looking at any of those parameters. So it's fewer parameters for the tech to look at.
Gotcha. So you mentioned TCL, and what was the other one? I can't remember.
And ELTCTL. Those are essentially, to boil it down for the general description there, noise. You're looking at how impervious your cable is to noise ingress. And the reason we don't have to do it for the shielded cable is because the shield is there to keep that noise out. We don't do that. But for unshielded, it's specified that we test the TCL for the unshielded cable.
Yeah, because like Lisa said, this is going to be used for automotive and industrial, so you're going to have a lot of EMI in those kinds of environments. So I can easily see why those would be critical things to want to look at. And when you showed those pictures, it looked even simpler than a category rated Cat 5e test. Cat 5e test.
Yeah,
it's pretty simple.
It's much simpler. There's not as much going on. Kind of like when you do fiber. There's fewer things to look at in a fiber test than there are in a copper test, right?
Right. So there's best practices when you go to use your tester. Make sure that it's calibrated yearly. Make sure that you have the project name set up in it, and you have the right kind of cable selected. Normal stuff for doing regular 4-pair cabling. Is there any specific best practices for single-pair Ethernet testing?
The biggest one is to perform a set reference with your test adapters and a 2-meter cord that is a what I would call a golden cord. You know, it's a perfect cord, a 2-meter cord, and do it with a cord that's the same type of cabling that you're going to be testing. That takes all the guesswork out of it. But make sure that you do perform a set reference and we recommend that when you get any new test adapters for your equipment, always perform a set reference procedure. It's just good practice. But for SPE, you definitely want to make sure you do that. And if you have a cable that's the same cabling that you're using for the testing, it's preferred to use that when you're doing that set reference for the SPE. That way you're kind of dialed in on that cable, if you will. The other thing is make sure you've got your cable selection in there done properly. Now, as more and more SPE comes out, you're going to see more cables added to our cable library. And it's important to choose the correct cable because that NVP, nominal velocity propagation, comes into play again. And that's that number that the manufacturer specifies. It's basically the speed limit of the cable. And that is critical to the length measurement being accurate.
Yeah, the example that I use in class all the time is, with NVP, after I explain what it is, and I said, when the tester does the test, we're really just timing it, see how long it gets to the end of the cable and back, and we divide that in half. Now we got the time and the speed, and it's a simple math formula at that point. If I tell you to get on your motorcycle and ride for 1 hour, and you have to ride at 70 miles an hour, how far do you drive? And most people say, 70 miles. That's how easy that calculation is. Once you know 2 of the 3 things.
That's right.
Oh, and I was saying, and the tester even has the ability, if you don't know, of course I'm kind of talking about 4-pair rule, but it can even learn the NVP.
Yes.
So to your point, if you have 2 of those facts, you know exactly what the length of the cable is, so that can work,
Yeah, and for the listener who might be listening, you heard Steve say SPE a couple times. That's just an acronym, single pair Ethernet. So just to clarify that.
I know you love acronyms, Chuck.
Well, no, I don't love acronyms. That's why I do the acronym challenge, because I don't like acronyms because it creates confusion. That's why I always try to make sure that I always kind of try to clarify them, right? Is single pair Ethernet cable, is it even category rated?
No, there's not really a category specification for SPE.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about some environmental factors, okay? Because again, it might be automotive, it might be industrial, it might be that long camera run, that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. Now we know that temperature affects Ethernet cabling, 4-pair cabling, right? What kind of? I'm assuming that's going to also affect single pair Ethernet too. But what is single pair Ethernet might be more susceptible to than a regular category rated cable would be susceptible to?
Well, you've always got heat, right? And in 4-pair cabling, we look at bundles of Cat 6A, for instance. As you start to run more and more of those cables have PoE running on them. If they're all running 90-watt PoE, you're going to have a significant amount of heat in that bundle. Whereas with the single pair cables, these are smaller. They're a smaller cable with just a single pair and shielded or unshielded in that jacket. It's likely going to dissipate that heat a little easier, but it comes back to the bundling. So how much of it are you bundling? And I don't know of any specifics on any bundle derating like we do with 4-pair. Letting you know that you've got to take this into consideration. But heat always affects resistance, and resistance affects how the cable performs. It affects insertion loss. It's resistance is kind of the enemy, right? So the more we can keep the resistance down, the better we are, and heat will impact that. So my guess is it's going to be a similar impact. Whether one's going to perform better than the other in a hot environment, I don't know. But if you're powering your low bandwidth devices over a single pair instead of using a 4-pair, you've got less copper conductors that are generating heat. Because you really, even if you're using 4-pair, you're using at least 2 pairs for PoE. Whereas we're only going to use 1 pair here. So, there may be some advantage on the single pair when it comes to the heat dissipation.
I'm glad you kind of said that because it sparked another question in my head. So with 4-pair cabling, one of the things we got to be super careful with, you mentioned already bundle sizes. for PoE. But also another reason we got to be careful about bundle sizes, because if you have really big bundles and going through J hooks or going through ladder rack, the weight of the bundle can crush those cables on the bottom, which will affect those pairs getting close to each other and interfering with each other. And you said single pair Ethernet's just two conductors. So I guess the impact for like J hooks or ladder rack and stuff, I guess, well, you still want to try to put the cable in as best you can. There's not going to be as much emphasis on the weight deforming the cable jacket, correct? And
Yeah,
the pairs inside,
and
pair inside of it.
yeah, and it's a much lighter cable. Obviously, you only got a single pair. Um, but when we think about it with four pair cabling, we're always thinking about the four pairs within the cable. And if that cable gets crushed, you're changing the geometry of the pair, which can generate more crosstalk from that pair to other pairs. Single pair, we're not dealing with that same thing. It's one pair per cable. Now, could you have crosstalk from one single pair Ethernet cable to another? Yeah, you probably could. But if they're shielded single pair Ethernet cables, and they're terminated properly, that just goes out the window. Now, that being said, if you pile a gazillion single pair Ethernet cables into a cable tray, the ones on the bottom are going to be under stress. And
Right.
there are other things that happen. The impedance is infected because as that insulation compresses on the conductors and the shield compresses, you're changing the impedance of the cable. So you could have other effects. So you're making me think about this on the fly, and I'm thinking there's probably a whole bunch of other installation things that need to be considered when it comes to single pair.
Now we can have you back on.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of there's some design and stuff. RCDDs are going to need to think about this
Right.
when they're designing
So you mean
single pair Ethernet.
when you mentioned the shielded, does both ends of single pair Ethernet or SPE have to be bonded to ground like its four pair counterpart?
It'd be the same process we do. It's going to be the same where the equipment at one end is going to terminate that device. So if you're plugging into a grounded device at the far end, that's the ground for that end, and you bond it at the panel back at the closet end.
It's the same process.
Yes, it's going to be the same process. You don't ground it at the wall outlet. You don't bond it at the wall outlet and bond it at the closet. It's tied to the building ground at the closet end, and then the connection to the equipment completes that ground on the remote end.
Gotcha. So at least I got a question for you. Let's say that some company sends their technician out to give them some information so they can build up a cost and time required for doing single pair Ethernet. What are some things that technician should look for?
Well, first of all, I think Steve touched on a little bit earlier about the time it takes for termination. So, hopefully they've got a little bit of experience under their belt at this point where they have terminated, because the connectors are different. There's a couple different kinds of connectors. So it'll depend on what kind of connector they're being asked to terminate, what their termination time is on that connection type. Other than that, I think they're probably just going to look at the same things that they always look at. I'm struggling to think of anything that's super different or special. And it's not. They're going to fall right into this, just like they're doing four pair. I think one of the things that I just want to highlight is we are a little bit ahead of the curve right now with SPE because, there's a very small handful of cable manufacturers who have released SPE cable or have it in the works. And one of the big things that's lagging is in devices that can actually connect to single pair Ethernet. And Steve, I don't know about you. I have not heard myself of any specific switches, cameras. Of course, we modified one, but very specific devices that are meant to run over this stuff broadly yet. So I think there's still quite a bit of time for folks to get their heads around the technology before it really starts hitting mainstream. I've not yet seen anything get written into any job specifications yet. Everything's still, your traditional 4-pair and fiber optic. So I think we're still a little bit of a ways away, but I think what's great about what you're doing, Chuck, is you're bringing the technology to light so people can start taking a look at it, getting educated on it, because one day there's a bid spec that's going to come and it's going to be on there and you want to be ready. So,
It's better to have it, meaning the knowledge, and not need
right?
it, than need
Yeah.
it and not have the knowledge. So,
Right?
right?
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
saying, let's talk about some of the emerging trends, because you said there's not a whole lot of dedicated devices or switches out there. So I'm assuming,
Inside. Yeah.
since you guys are way more plugged into that, what are you guys hearing? What might be coming down the pike?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I think that's probably a very obvious choice is building sensors. Because that's one of the main applications when you take a look at your industrial environments. And then probably those lower voltage cameras. Those are probably the first two things that I would expect and that I'm hearing buzz about. Steve, what about you? Have you heard of anything beyond those?
No, not at this.
Like, I haven't heard about any specific switches or,
No, it's still emerging. And one of the
yeah.
things we had an episode of Tech Talk with Steve a while back. Um, it was early this year. I had a guest on from R&M over in Europe, and they have an SPE solution. And one of the things that they demonstrated was some of their customers, what they're doing is they're using the SPE cabling, and because there's no devices that they can connect to the endpoints yet, and the switches aren't there yet, they're actually using. Remember, we used to use media converters to go from like a 100 base T to a fiber connection. They're using like a 10 base T to a 10 base T1L. So an RJ45 Ethernet to single pair Ethernet converter. And you can put these at each end of the single pair cabling. So you can now install a single pair cabling. For now, you put the media converters essentially at each end of the cabling, and you can go into whatever switch and device you want to. The other thing that, and I can't remember the manufacturer that has this, but there is a way of utilizing the 4-pair and running your 4 single pair Ethernets over the 4-pair, and at the far end, you actually split them out. Kind of like work group cabling, if you will, where you're running SPE, if as long as these devices are within a certain range of each other, run your SPE cabling from that point. So like a consolidation point or a work group, we used to call them. So that's the kind of things we're starting to see that people are implementing until we get all the devices out there that have the cameras. I was at a show back in May in South Carolina. It was the Tech Fest when we were there, Chuck. We had, while I was showing the SPE connectors they were running SPE tests. They had a camera manufacturer there, and the guy came over. He was really excited about looking at this connector because they wanted to look at doing that with cameras. So it's coming. It's
That's a great idea, because one of the biggest complaints I hear is camera manufacturers don't understand how much space is needed for an APHC footprint
yeah.
to be able to plug it in. That's a complaint I hear quite often.
Yeah. Yep. You can fit 2 single pair Ethernet LCs side by side in the same footprint that you can put a 4-pair 8P8C. Now, you're only getting 2 pairs in there, but you're getting 2 connections versus a single connection. So
you guys go to the shows way more than I do, and I'm gonna ask you to get out your crystal ball, but I'm not gonna hold you to your prediction. Okay, it's not like I'm gonna put it in my calendar and then call you guys, however far in the future you say this. But how far away would you think we are from seeing more equipment, more devices come online for single pair Ethernet? How much of a time frame does the person who's listening to the show? How much of a time frame do they have to learn to become efficient with single pair Ethernet before they start seeing a lot of influx on those devices?
Start learning about it now. I think that by this time next year, you're going to see devices, and you're going to start to see devices. And early to mid 2025, you're going to start to see this take off to where it's going to be specified in our smart buildings on a regular basis. And again, to clarify, it's not going to take the place of our 4-pair Ethernet. It's
Right.
it's not going to replace running your desktop applications over a 1 gig solution. That's not what it's for. It's to free up bandwidth from our main network by offloading these low bandwidth devices. So it's going to supplement the 4-pair cabling system, reduce the demand on the regular network, reduce the amount of 4-pair cabling that we have to use, which reduces the raw materials. It all goes into sustainability. We're all aware of that. So there's a lot of benefits that we're going to start to see. So I'd say you're going to start to see the gear by this time next year. And then by 2025, early to mid 2025, you're going to start to see it on specifications.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. I like this. See, look at that. I'm ahead of the schedule.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm ahead of. I'm a groundbreaker. Yeah, that's it.
Ahead of the curve, Chuck. You're ahead of the curve.
Yes.
Now now I'm not saying go find a single pair Ethernet stock and invest in it, because God knows I'm not going to be the best at playing the stock market. So
no, but that's what you proved my point exactly. You guys go to way more industry events than I do because I'm usually stuck teaching somewhere.
Yeah.
And so you have manufacturers come up to you and who express interest and stuff like that. That's why I asked you that question, because you obviously get way more interactions than I do. And I'm kind of jealous that I don't get to go to more events. But hey, it is what it is. So at least this one's quick for you. So we have some time. We need to learn. Is there any good resources out there now that are available to technicians or maybe that estimator to learn more about single pair Ethernet?
Oh gosh, that is a great question, Chuck. So there is a ratified standard, so that's going to talk about the different measurements and what you're going to have to test to and what you're going to have to test, as Steve demonstrated. But gosh, I can't think of any specific educational resources because a lot of the stuff's just not out there yet.
So Lisa, you're engaged with a couple of organizations on SPE, right? Like the SPE Consortium. Would they have any resources?
Right now, the work that we're doing doesn't have, education and training and how-tos, and we're just not there yet. And I think a lot of that is because of, as we've already discussed, there's not a lot of endpoint devices and all that good stuff. Another group I'm on is the Smart Building group. And, I'll tell you, single pair Ethernet's a small little portion of what we're discussing. And it's just because, there's just not a lot of stuff out there yet. But I think as we start to see devices start to roll out, we see more cable manufacturers start to come out with the technologies, then we will start to see resources. But really right now, I am not aware of, and I'm on a lot of committees, any resources just yet.
Gotcha.
Really helping technicians.
You could go to our Tech Talk with Steve past episodes and look at the single pair Ethernet stuff we've done on there. Will be if you attend Bixie, there's bound to be things there. There was a SPE session in the last one, and there may be one in the one coming up in January as well. So always look and see what's coming up at the Bixie conferences, because you can get good education there. But reach out to us, because as things change, we'll probably be doing some more things. We'll probably have another webinar coming up on SPE. So, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Facebook, whatever media platform you use, because as we get more information about SPE and as we find sources for education like this, we'll definitely be sharing those on our social media platforms.
And sign up for the newsletter for Tech Talk with Steve.
Right? And one thing to add, Steve, since you're talking about our resources, I was trying to think broadly, but we do have some great resources. And I will tell you, there is a webinar that we did on single pair Ethernet with some folks from Leviton. The on-demand version of that webinar is on our website, But that webinar was actually also converted into an editorial article for ICT Magazine,
Oh,
ICT
nice.
Today Magazine. And that article is also available on our website. And it goes a little bit deep. And actually, Steve, it talks about, the step sizes and, different things you have to be aware of. And it is done from the perspective of both a cable manufacturer and a test equipment manufacturer. So that is, and us coming together to talk about this technology. So that's a great article to take a look
Yeah,
at.
make sure you
And
send
that's
me
on
the
our
link to
website.
that, and I'll put that in the description down below,
Okay.
so that way people can link
Yep.
to it. Because I'll put links to you guys and AEM on there as well. That way, if somebody wants
Absolutely.
to go watch it, because I'm going to go watch it. I probably have already watched it, but I've slept since then, so I don't remember if I've watched it or not.
I hope you have. It was a bit ago.
Yeah.
I
People
will
wonder why.
gladly do that.
I've got a horrible memory, but that's why I document everything because my bad memory. So, what a fantastic subject and two good experts on it. Yes, this is going to be a good episode when it goes out. I appreciate you guys coming on today.
Our
Thanks for
pleasure.
having us, Chuck.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.